Welcome back to Behavioral Threat Analysis Center Beyond the Bulletin. I'm your host, Dr. Kristin Schneider, and I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Pete Lapp.
Hey everybody, how are you?
We have another great episode planned for you today, and we are so excited about the guest that is joining us today. This is one that we've been planning for quite a while now and are really excited to bring you. Our guest today is Dr. Cherylynn Lee. She is a police psychologist living and working in Santa Barbara, California. And she has, I think, so many different and exciting things that she can talk about with us. But the thing that we're going to really focus in on with her today is secondary trauma. This is our latest bulletin, hot off the press, and it's a topic that I think is going to appeal to our listeners from a variety of different backgrounds. We're going to get into this topic and really talk about what trauma is, what secondary trauma is, some of the signs that you might see, some of the things that you might be on the lookout for, and really how we can work with this, both in a preventative way, and also when we see some of these signs that we're struggling or that our colleagues are struggling, some of the things that we can actually do to take steps to intervene and to move forward. Because a lot of us work in really challenging environments where we are exposed to traumatic events. So I'm so excited to have this guest with us today. I think this is going to be really applied stuff that people can use. Pete, what about you? What are you excited to talk about with Dr. Lee today?
Well, I'm excited on a number of reasons. It's Friday, and we're in this, we're down at Stafford, Virginia, in this lovely new podcast booth where I'm joined by Brandy, our boss, our government lead. Hi, Brandy. How are you?
Hi, how are you? I'm doing well today.
Thank you for joining our podcast. And I know that Dr. Lee is in a much warmer, nicer climate right now. What's the temperature like where you're at? What's the weather like in your neck of the woods?
Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
And I have to say, it's a freezing cold 63 degrees at 9:15 in the morning. There's a little bit of cloud cover from the ocean, but that should burn up in about 15 minutes, and it'll get to about 75 degrees today.
So light jacket early on, and then you're going to be fine in a t-shirt later. That's wonderful. Here on the East Coast, it's rainy, miserable, cloudy. I retired my sweatshirts for the season, and they're back in action. So anyway, that's what I think about her. I feel traumatized already just because of the weather.
Well, so we know one thing about Dr. Lee already, which is that she knows how to pick a great place to live.
Yes.
So we've got some excellent judgment and decision making. We're going to see what else she has to share with us today.
Everything looks different on the surface, right? If you were to take a look in my bank accounts, I don't know that you would support the notion that I make good decisions in this realm, but here we are. My kids are in schools. It's not changing, so we're locked in.
First name basis with the Amazon driver.
It's like a thing or two. Yeah.
He does this for a living. Oh my goodness. Well, tell us a little bit about being a police psychologist. What does that mean? What does your work involve? What are some of the things you get to do in that capacity?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So my doctorate is in clinical psychology, and what you can do is you specialize with gaining training or experience in public safety and in particular in policing in my case, and then you can announce yourself as a subject matter expert in police psychology, and that can be your title. And so I've been in this field for about 10 years now, and I have a lot of different, there's a lot of different tentacles in different things within this realm. So I think first and foremost, what's important to mention is I'm an operational psychologist. And so I am a member of 2 crisis negotiation teams. And so when there are SWAT callouts and there are high exigent cases happening in the field, I get to deploy with those teams and support the negotiators. I also supervise a sworn team of mental health co-responders that are actually the management arm of our BTAM program. Speaking of BTAM, when we have individuals or persons of concern, oftentimes our intel detectives will deploy out to interview those individuals, and I'll deploy out with them to support them in the interview and the assessment and management components thereafter. So that's mainly the operational components. I also have a private practice where I see first responders only, and mostly cops and DA investigators and individuals from 3-letter agencies. And I specialize in the ugly stuff. So line of duty deaths, OISs, TCs with multiple fatalities, multiple casualty events, those sorts of things. And so in addition to doing one-on-one therapy, I also deploy all across the state of California to do critical incident stress debriefs. And so when there are big, ugly things that happen in the field, I can deploy to those and assist our first responders on scene as well. And in my career, I've done about 50 of those so far. And then
Wow.
I'll add one more thing maybe.
Because that's not enough. You have time for anything else.
Raising 2 children is hard. So the more that I can be out of the house, kind of the better sometimes. So this is not entirely altruistic. But I'm also a volunteer with the FBI. And so in their 40-hour crisis negotiation course, I get to go and teach about negotiating with individuals with mental illness or suicidal subjects, and also have an officer wellness block of instruction as well.
You said OIS as an acronym. What does that mean?
Yeah, that's officer involved shooting.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I've never heard of that.
So all kinds of different potential applications. You get to do a lot of really exciting but really hard work. I mean, this is all stuff. I mean, there's reason not just that you are assisting other people in helping, try to cope with some of these challenging situations, but you also have to figure out how to do that yourself across a variety of different domains. Where did you, let's back it up a little bit. How the heck did you get into this, right? So I know you've got the background, you've got the PhD in clinical psychology. Sounds like you and I have that in common. We went different directions with it though. Sounds like maybe at the time that I went and started working with service members at the VA, and focusing on trauma in returning service members, you kind of took a different direction with it. Can you tell us more about how you, this stuff is amazing and hard work. How on earth did you find yourself here doing this work?
Yeah, great question. Completely by accident is the short answer.
Okay.
So about 10 years ago, I was working in my postdoc assignment. So I was working in drug treatment with community members, and I met a lieutenant who wanted to start something called CIT, or crisis intervention training, and within the organization he worked in. And as a psychologist, part of our ethics code is to donate our time to the greater good and volunteer. And so I thought, okay, I can do that. And so I started volunteering my time and teaching law enforcement about mental health and de-escalation, and just fell in love with the culture. I've come to the realization I have a serious condition called assertiveness, and it's ADA protected.
It's incurable.
It is incurable, and one of the side effects is continuing to insert myself into places where I can problem solve. And so I started attending high-level meetings and trying to resolve some of the issues that officers were bringing to my attention in the class, and that turned into the department asking me if I would come on part-time. And that came, and about a year and a half later, that turned into the department creating a full-time position of behavioral sciences manager. I wrote my own job description because the cops didn't know what to do with me, so it's entirely my fault. And I've been doing this work ever since. Yeah, so completely by accident.
Really incredible, and yet with a drive that comes from seeing problems that needed to be solved, seeing places where you could help and intervene, and recognizing that there was something that you could do, maybe that wasn't being done before.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about the relationship between, mental health and law enforcement, if we're thinking about community response, right? Not the mental health of our officers, but that of the community. And there's a lot of attention on that right now in the BTAM community, in the call for service, and just the general work that these officers do. And so there was a lot of tension, if you will, between the two cultures. And so as a psychologist who appreciates 4-letter words and authenticity and candor, but can also speak doctor when I need to, I was able to bridge gaps that otherwise wouldn't have been possible. And for that reason, we have better service to the community. And then my officers, my deputies feel less helpless on these calls. And so that's a win all day long.
How did the law enforcement community, how did they grow to accept you? I assume they do. What talk about that evolution.
Sure. Well, I think at first I didn't know what I didn't know, and that was probably good for me to not really have a large understanding of the culture I was walking into, and just trying to do my best. I kept showing up, and I think, when you're working with high performers and A-type personalities and individuals who are people readers and are consistently lied to by the community, and there's a lot of administrative betrayal and other things, they're highly suspect of newcomers, and rightfully so. What has happened over the years is I continuously show up and do the hard work and provide expertise. And it's not just 9 to 5. When I'm presenting on wellness or organizational wellness or otherwise officer wellness, I'm not taking out the DSM and using, big 15-letter words because I can. I'm talking in real, tangible, extractable information that can be utilized. And then, I'm a member of the department, and so the deputies and officers watch me pick my nose. They've seen me become a mom, and my kids grow up, and we share pictures. And so I think because they have access to the human side of me, they accept the professional side of me, and that's a great thing.
Because it's a unique culture. It's a tough culture. There's a definitely us versus them kind of culture. I grew up in that, if you will. So I can see them taking a while to warm up to you and build that trust. But then once they do and see the benefits of it, I've got to think that's incredibly cathartic for them.
I'd like to think so. At the organization I have my private practice through, it's a group practice because I hate paperwork and billing, and so they take care of that part. Yeah. And it used to be that law enforcement would call a 1-800 number and they would get assigned to me. Now that's not how I receive patients. It's all through word of mouth. It's all through folks that have seen me speak, or a buddy of theirs saw me, or there's some sort of warm handoff. And so there's certainly something to be said about building a reputation and being consistent and being authentic. I think a lot of clinicians, a lot of psychologists in particular, were taught, the tabula rasa, which is, be a blank slate and let your patient bring in all the stuff and, ask them how they feel and go, and and that doesn't work with our that's inauthentic.
I've never been good at doing that anyway.
Which is probably one of the reasons you and I get along so well, right? Yeah. And so I think
you've got to bring your real authentic self to these experiences, right? Yeah. That it's absolutely necessary. People know when you're not being real with them.
They do, and that's not fair to them. And as a psychologist, that's not going to get my mission accomplished. If my mission is to help them thrive in their personal and professional life, and they're not going to trust me because I'm not being authentic, I've already failed, and it's a waste of my time and a waste of theirs. And that's not what we're here for.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you also touched on the kind of embedded nature of your role, I think is so key. I mean, I think that's where our department has had a lot of success, just across the military over the past couple of decades in really moving towards embedding psychologists with units. They've got to be somebody that you already know that you can reach out and connect with, not somebody that you have to, make a special effort to go and find and meet. I think it makes it so much more accessible to people when you're already a known quantity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a responsibility to my patients to ensure that, there's no uncomfortable crossover in the field. But, I've had folks that I see privately that I'm also on teams with out in the world. And I ask them, how is that for you? And it's fine. They say, well, you get to see me out in the real world and it works for me. And so, it's a beautiful thing to see how far we've come in the last few years. And I'd like to think I've had an impact on our officers being more comfortable seeing therapists, going to therapy, talking about it. It's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
As a former practitioner, I can't tell you how happy that makes me feel. I was a cop from 94 to 98, and you're speaking a foreign language. The only psychologist I met was when I was hired into one department. And I don't know that I saw things or experienced things as a cop that I needed to talk to a psychologist. I mean, maybe some people around me would disagree at that point in time, but it's such a welcome kind of aspect of the job now that psychology is so welcomed and appreciated by the practitioners doing those hard jobs. I can only imagine that being such a better environment.
What about as an agent, Pete? Did you find that to be true as an agent as well?
I mean, we had Yeah, I think we were a little more open-minded to it. I don't know that I dealt a lot with psychologists as an agent. And again, though, I didn't do anything that required me. I didn't have an officer-involved shooting. I wasn't involved in some of the things we're going to talk about that created trauma. So I don't know that I absolutely needed it, but I knew it was there if I did professionally. So I think the culture is changing to be more open and welcome to it. And it warms my heart, frankly.
Yeah. Well, there's still a lot of misunderstanding, I think, of mental health, of mental health treatment, what it means to get mental health treatment. I think there's still an awful lot of barriers. I mean, I think within our community of the Department of War, we've got people with security clearances. And there's still, I think, a really fundamental misunderstanding. People think that if they go to get mental health treatment, it's going to somehow endanger their security clearance. And nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, it's really quite the opposite of that. Getting mental health treatment is the way to mitigate a concern about mental health that could affect your security clearance, right? It's the untreated mental health issue that we're really concerned about. And I'm sure that goes for the populations that you're working.
Yeah, and to be honest, the officer involved suicides, the military suicides, those are things that aren't. I hope they've been diminished, and maybe Dr. Lee, you can comment on that from the law enforcement perspective. But they're still prevalent. They're still there. There's still one is one too many, obviously.
Well, absolutely, and I think there's a couple important points you bring up. As a culture, we are getting more comfortable with psychologists being embedded and going to therapy. But what we're still doing, and Pete, to sort of your point, is we're waiting. We as in law enforcement, we're waiting until we're in the basement of our rock bottom to get help.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know if I needed this psychologist. It wasn't that bad. I wasn't, my wife wasn't halfway out the door. I wasn't missing limbs. I didn't go through a shooting. And so what we're doing is we're talking ourselves into this culture where now we only go when it's gotten that bad, when we've had the barrel of the gun in our mouth the night before. And so I think what we need to do is reframe therapy as not just being something for broken people that lifts folks off the floor when they're a puddle, but let's talk about resilience building and training to inoculate yourselves from the emotional impact of all the stuff that you see and you smell and you deal with. And let's get ahead of it before it gets that bad. In the 10 years I've been doing this, I've never ever had a cop that has come and seen me that hasn't said, I'm wasting your time. Somebody has it worse than I do. Doesn't this sound ridiculous? And that's a real problem. And so one of the things that I'm seeing trending on the boots on the ground law enforcement side is something called wellness checks, where law enforcement shall meet with a psychologist once a year. It's preventative, right? And the value then is you're exposing them to a therapist where there isn't a power differential, right? So in a lot of local law enforcement, they have to see a psychologist for pre-employment. And in that environment, the psychologist's job is to be evaluative and determine whether or not you can have a job or not. And if that's your only exposure to a therapist, why then would you go when you're not feeling well? Because then that feeds the rumor mill or the idea that therapists are only ever evaluative, and you're going to get put on the rubber gun squad, so to speak, if you see one.
Yeah, and let's be honest, suicide's it's the worst of the way to handle and manage stress, but cops have an ability, and I'm speaking from personal experience, alcohol misuse is an aspect of an unhealthy way of dealing with the stress and the trauma that they observe and live through on the job. I know this from personal experience.
Yeah. And to your question about suicide, it's really hard to say if we're trending one way or another because our data collection is not consistent and it's not robust. And a lot of it is self-report from organizations who may not want to share that information or who may not share it when somebody's retired. I mean, the average lifespan for law enforcement after retirement is 6 years.
Yeah.
And we're not capturing the suicides that happen in retirement. There's a lot of talk at the federal level, and there have been some legislative changes about considering them line of duty deaths. And so we're making some headway in sort of the broadcast and understanding of suicide in our law enforcement, but it's really hard to measure if we're making an impact or not. We need to do better data collection. And alcohol works until it doesn't. So it's great until it's not. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's really highlighting the fact that people will find ways to cope, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have healthy ways to cope, you will use unhealthy ways to cope. So equipping people with healthy strategies is so key.
It is, and making it tangible and accessible, right? If I say, you need to get 8.5 hours of sleep, you need to eat 3 square meals, you need to put your toes in the sand, you need to meditate every day, you're going to tell me to right? That's completely unrealistic. And so we have to come up with tools that are, going to fit within the culture and the organization. The other thing that I think is meaningful to mention is one of the best coping skills we have, and best meaning it's good for the organization, is we just dive into more work. And so with as much overtime as we can stack, as many collateral assignments as we can stack, what that does is that keeps you in an operational thinking part of your brain and not in the emotional, let's process, the 3 dead kids that you couldn't save part of your brain. And when you retire, the overtime isn't available and the collateral assignments aren't there. And suddenly you're dealt with all of the stress, the trauma, the moral injury, the cases, the investigations that you've put on that shelf for decades. And if you're not taking care of yourself and you're not, you don't have maintenance of your psychological well-being, all that stuff comes falling down at once. And that can feel really overwhelming. And I think that's what leads a lot of our folks to suicide.
Well, don't forget that 3-headed monster, shift work. Oh my God. I'm having flashbacks now of 12 to 12, 4 to 12. I mean, the constant wear on your body of nights versus days versus nights. And then when you're not on nights, then you're at home when you're going to bed normal with your family. And it's like your body is just, shift work is incredibly difficult on a human body, whether you're a nurse or a doctor or, you drive an Amazon truck or whatever. Cops, shift work is brutal.
Yeah, you're right. Even just the physiological effect of that, even if you weren't dealing with stressful or traumatic material.
Right. And, so let's say there's a SWAT call out and we go to briefing at 1 a.m. and then the call out is at 3 a.m. and we're operational until 7 a.m. A lot of my guys still have to go and work their regular shift because if they don't, now we've got to backfill with overtime and that's expensive and the county doesn't like that. And so now they're working their regular shift and they get home and they may or may not have a few hours of sleep because they haven't seen their kids all day. So they have to choose. Do I take care of myself or do I insert myself as a parent into my own family and be present? And that just snowballs for sometimes years at a time.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, because now we're starting to talk about both stress and trauma, right? They're not the same thing, but what you're saying makes me realize trauma is often coming on top of very, very stressful experiences, both baseline, like these things we're talking about can be physiologically stressful, emotionally stressful, psychologically stressful. And then you take someone and you put them under a constant state of stress, and then you add trauma to it. That's, we're not talking about trauma that's necessarily a one-time experience, right? Let's dive into that a little bit. What would you say? What is the difference between stress and trauma, right? People talk about trauma a lot, but I think we don't always carefully define it.
No, I would agree. And there's also moral injury, which I think is an important, it completes the triad of stuff we ingest that makes us different and changes us throughout our careers. But stress can be good or bad. Stress is a physiological reaction to oftentimes exogenous stimuli, like things in the environment that happen, right? So the way that I like to package this, if you'll come along this ride for a moment, is
let's go.
All right. So Pete, Kristin, do you guys like roller coasters?
No. Next question.
Okay. So Pete, you're on Team Common Sense with me. Kristin, what about you?
I love them.
Brandy loves them.
Oh, Brandy loves them. Okay, Brandy, we can talk about that later.
Sorry, ask the question again.
Do you like roller coasters?
Love them. I'm going to Six Flags tomorrow.
Okay, so you two can go and have fun, and Pete and I will go have a beer and do other things. But in any case, so let's say all of us, okay, the 4 of us, we're on a roller coaster, and we're on the big rickety thing that whatever, we're going up the thing to eventually drop. And there's some biological stuff happening in our bodies, right? Our heart rate is increasing. Our head is getting, maybe we're getting a little lightheaded. Our stomach is doing flips. And for you two that like roller coasters, you're interpreting that stimuli as let's go, right? That's excitement. You're happy. Now,
I
Pete
laugh
and I
hysterically.
Yeah, that's
That's my
psychotic,
reaction.
but that's okay. We can deal with that later. But so Pete and I are on Team Common Sense, right? So we're on the roller coaster, and our head's getting light, and our stomach is doing flips, and we might be, our hands might be shaky a little bit, and we're interpreting that data as, why do we keep making these poor decisions? Like, why are we here? This is a terrible idea, right? So stress is individualized, but essentially, our mind attributes whether it's positive or negative. So stress can be good or bad. I think that's the major point that I want to illuminate here. And it's biological in nature, right? So I mentioned some of the symptoms or indicators that you're under stress. Trauma is, when you're exposed to things that, there's a few different ways to define trauma. I think when I ask folks, oftentimes in law enforcement, what do they think trauma is? They'll tell me it's an officer-involved shooting, or it's an event where there's, bodies on the floor, right? It's some big catastrophic event. Generally speaking, trauma is defined as an event that overwhelms your ability to cope, regardless of what the circumstances are. What we need to become more familiar with is the idea that trauma is less about the incident or the investigation or the outside thing, and it's more about who you are. So what's traumatic to Kristin may not be traumatic to me.
The response.
The response, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot about who you are and what you bring to the table. Like for me, I remember there was a case that I was working, and I was watching. It was a juvenile who's being radicalized by ISIS. And I'm watching the videos, and, there's all the stuff that we see, the beheadings and, all of the propaganda. And that was more difficult for me to digest than being on scene of an officer-involved shooting and watching my friends shoot and kill somebody because the bad guy had the gun pointed at my friends and my friends shot first. Yeah. And so for somebody else, it might be flipped, right? So it's just individualized.
Meaning out of the situation, isn't it? Not just about what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also about your history and your level of desensitization and what you've been exposed to. And, I think the key for mitigating any of this, on some level is self-awareness. And to bring it back to talking about therapy, that's a lot of what therapy does, is it's putting up a mirror and it's allowing you to self-assess so that, okay, watching videos of beheadings is not my cup of tea. So maybe I need to make sure I get that workout in, or make sure that I don't stack the entire day thereafter. With other cases, right? So that's some of how we can, add tools to the tool belt to mitigate this stuff, because what we don't have a choice is to not see it and to not engage in the work. We've made that decision, so we're here, but we got to be whole to do it.
Well, to use your roller coaster analogy, in my career at the Bureau, I knew that I could never work the child sex crime violation, the CSAM. There was absolutely no way. And I started out, I didn't have kids when I started at the FBI, but I had an opportunity later on, and I just knew that was not a roller coaster that I was going to go on, because I knew my temperament. I wouldn't have the ability to be calm and objective. And my hats are off to all those folks in law enforcement that work those really, really difficult kind of cases. And I'm sure you deal with individuals who are on the investigative side of that have to deal with what they're seeing and processing that in a healthy way. And that's a tough violation to be involved with.
Absolutely. And the expectation that you're going to be okay after observing that information and then talking to a suspect and maybe trying to align with him as an investigation strategy to get the confession. Yeah. I mean, that's not something that is supposed to be digestible, that we're then, as human beings supposed to just move on with our day, right? Like we're human and impacted by that. And so acknowledging that and leaning into it and then mitigating it is important, because, investigations in that sense are so important. And a lot of our missions are zero fail missions. And in my opinion, that's one of them. And when we're not okay, we're not as attentive to the work, and we're not giving the victims our best. And that's not what we sign up for either. So, a lot of folks in this space think that taking care of themselves is selfish. One of the ways to reframe that is it's absolutely it's absolutely not selfish. You're doing your community a disservice and your colleagues a disservice if you're showing up to work hungover, or you're showing up to work and you haven't slept because you're not dealing with the thing from 20 years ago.
Right, right. And I think that, that investigator, that cop, that agent can't come home and like vent to their family or share.
No.
It's like impossible. So they bottle that up, and then they hope to find Cherylynn at the gym and say, I've got to talk to you about this thing I saw, and I'm going to rip somebody's head off. Mm-hmm. But I got to talk to you because I can't tell my family what I just saw on video. That's really hard.
Well, you're hitting on something important, Pete, which is that we really do have a fundamental need as people to talk about our experiences, to share them, and to work through them, especially these types of experiences we're talking about, things that are extremely stressful or traumatic. And we're talking about a group of people that routinely get this kind of exposure. And so you've got to have a plan for how you're going to deal with this, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say yes and no. So I think being aware of the problem is 55% of solving it, right? So you can't solve a problem you're not aware of. You can't help a victim if there's no 911. We can't stop an attack if there's no leakage, right? And information that it's coming. And the same is true of our own well-being. We can't get better if we're not aware of where we're not our best. And so I think understanding what your symptoms and indicators are when you're not okay is incredibly important. And then finding somebody like a therapist to help draft the ops plan to execute is what's important. Because a lot of my guys come in and they go, Doc, I know I'm not okay. My wife has been telling me for years. My kids aren't talking to me, right? Like I know I'm not okay because I can't sit still for more than 2 minutes without needing to do something and get up and move or solve a problem, right? But the problem is that they don't know how to fix it. And that's where therapists come in, and we got to create really tangible plans where folks can execute, and that's how I see therapy, at least for law enforcement.
I had an analyst, a crime analyst from the FBI's BAU, the Behavioral Analysis Unit, who did the crime analysis for the Uvalde shooting, and she came in and talked to my class. I won't name her. She's no longer at the bureau, but she wasn't at the event at the shooting. I don't think she ever even went to the crime scene, but she looked at every piece of evidence, every video from every, body camera, from everything, and would wake up with nightmares. She told my class, I woke up with nightmares of being under a desk hiding, and she was never even in the room. And that struck me as just so powerful of how that can, these things that we have to witness as part of the job can impact our psyche in a very negative way. And one of the ways that she coped with it, she was a fantasy fiction writer. And then her and her partner would check in with each other every day and say, are you good today? And no, I'm not good today. Like, well, let's not look at the stuff today. Let's do some training. Let's do some other things. And then they would have a routine way of checking in with each other to see, are you okay today to go through the evidence and do the job that we have to do. I thought it was a great learning experience for me.
Yeah, and I think I know who you're talking about. I've done some training with and for the BAU, in particular in wellness, and
she's a badass.
Yeah, she is. Yeah, she is. I couldn't pull off her haircut, I don't think. But in any case, yes. Yeah, she is.
No, I'm not saying you couldn't, but she's such a unique personality, and
indeed.
They have TV characters that are scripted right after her. It's amazing.
That they do. Yeah, I won't name the TV show because now we're getting real granular. But I think to be impacted by this stuff is normal and makes sense. So let's pretend that this isn't true of anybody on this call for sure, anybody listening for sure. But let's say that you didn't work out for 10 years. Okay. And then you wake up today, and today's going to be the day that you're going to get back at it because summer's coming and it's time to get into a bathing suit or whatever it is, right? So you make a poor decision and you do 600 sit-ups today. Okay. Would you expect to be sore?
Yes.
Yeah. Would you expect to be sore for a little while?
Yes.
Yeah. In a month, in 2 months, would you expect that soreness to increase or get worse or become functionally problematic?
No.
Yeah. No. Oh, sorry. No. Yes. No. Okay. Sorry.
So, viewing that content is like doing 600 sit-ups. And you're going to be sore. And the soreness is the not okay, right? So that's avoidance behavior, or that's apathy, or that's hypervigilance, or that's nightmares, or that's emotional exhaustion, or that's burnout, or that's yelling at your spouse, or that's disconnecting from your kids, right? That's the finding your answer in the bottom of a bottle. Those are the indicators that we're not okay oftentimes. Now, if that stuff is happening in a month or 2 months beyond the viewing of the material and whatever hopefully your organization has provided to you to help process it, maybe that injury is a little bit deeper. And now it's time to talk to somebody like a therapist or a professional, because now that's beyond the scope of what's acceptable. And the trauma, if you will, or the injury, if you will, to the brain is a little bit deeper. And there's some work to be done there so that you don't have to carry it in retirement or for the rest of your career.
That kind of chronic stress or chronic strain that you see over time.
Yeah. It's hard.
Yeah, that sounds like that's an important thing to be on the lookout for those of us who work in these types of roles, is to notice when things tend to be sticking with you, or you keep coming back to an experience that that maybe seems like you're having trouble moving past it.
Yeah. And it's important to be aware of that and to then take it to somebody who can help you disposition it, right? And not everybody needs therapy. Some people find it in the gym. Some people go surfing. Some people have great friends or colleagues and other things. But we have to find an outlet, especially for, these morally injurious, things that a lot of time in the BTAM world we're working with. 14-year-olds should not want to commit mass murder, right? That is something that philosophically shouldn't be the case, but here we are, and this is the world we live in. And so, it's those moral injuries, those true victims, the innocent kids, the things that we can't control, the things that never should be that way. Those are the things that tend to change us and stick with us. And those are the things that we can navigate and mitigate. Now, the therapy process is not voodoo. It's not to make you forget about these things, but it's to separate the emotion from the memory so that it's no longer in control of you, right? That's the goal.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, you mentioned a couple of different things there that different threads I kind of want to pull on. One of the things that you mentioned just got me thinking. There are a lot of different ways. You're right. It's not just therapy. I think therapy can be an enormous and really helpful tool. Any patient that I've ever worked with will also tell you I'm a big believer in we've got to have lots of different tools for lots of different things, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just one size fits all, one approach fits everyone. But you mentioned a couple of things which I think are so important to so many people, exercise being one of them. Why is it that getting the body moving, if people can approach exercise in lots of different ways, but I think for people that are struggling to manage stress, exercise and movement can be really, really impactful.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of good research coming out right now about the benefits of exercise on our psychological well-being. And there's a lot of good evidence that shows that exercise can be as effective, if not more effective, than antidepressant medication. And there's a chemical boost that we get from exercise. Not to mention, if you're in the field and you may have to go hands-on, it prepares you for the physical fight and the mental fight. Exercise expels that negative energy. So you're putting all those cases on the shelf, right? And it needs to come down. And so it gives us a way to dispel that anxiety and get rid of it. It's also a place where we are in control. And most of us in this field like being in control. And so that's a positive thing. I think exercise is the number one. Well, I know it's the number one thing that I prescribe to all my patients. Everybody that's coming in to talk, we're going to first get you on a regimen. We're going to talk about exercise and nutrition because I want you to build your resilience for when we do the deeper trauma work. Exercise is so incredibly valuable to help disposition the ugly and awful stuff that we have to digest as a part of this profession. And there's a lot of good research that highlight the reasons why. It's my favorite tool. I have to lift heavy things and drop them. But also it's not my only tool. And I think that's important to note as well, because you can certainly overdo it.
One of the things
I think that's right. It can't be the only thing that you use.
One of the things that made me want to go to the FBI, there were many reasons, but they would pay us 3 hours a week on the clock to go to the gym. And some people maybe turn 3 hours into 5 or 6, I won't lie. occasionally. But it spoke to me in terms of like, physical fitness was a part of getting into law enforcement. And then they wanted you to continue to exercise. I mean, they didn't want a heavier set FBI agent running around, representing the FBI, but also the mental health and the physical conditioning health of that. It was a protocol that you continued through your career, and they would put gyms in field offices, and I think that's one of the things that's unfortunately lacks in local law enforcement. Although maybe it's changed in the 25 years since I've been there, where there maybe is more of an emphasis and an ability, because they actually maybe pay you to go, or you can do it on the clock, or at least there's a gym in the police station, at least some of the bigger police departments maybe.
Yeah, it is very department specific.
Yeah.
In California, one of the good things that happened in the last couple of years is we got a chunk of money, we as in law enforcement, for each organization, and it was dependent on how big your organization is, dictated how many dollars you got, and it shall be spent on wellness. And one of the things that a lot of the organizations I worked with did was buy gym equipment and update gym equipment. And that's great, but if you don't give your officers and deputies on-duty workout time, then it's useless.
Right.
It's a box that you're checking. So we have to also look at the infrastructure. So I mentioned I supervise a sworn team. They all get on-duty workout time. And as much as I can force it outside of, a POBAR issue or an MOU issue or a union issue, I ensure to the best of my ability we can make it happen. One of the commanders I work with, he was a lieutenant over a station recently before he promoted. And he would run calls as a lieutenant over a station so that his deputies could go and get their workout in. So I think it's important that we talk about it, but also provide the infrastructure to make it happen. It also shows that the organization is investing in you as your own well-being, and so it goes a lot towards just that the feeling valued by your organization as well. There's just so many benefits to institutionalizing it in that way.
I think that's very true. It's one of those things that I think has to be a core part of a sort of our preventative strategy for working on some of these things, right? It's not going to be, it can't be your whole plan. But I think having a good, solid foundation of a plan, of an exercise routine can be so fundamental for building wellness on top of that. What are the other components that people should be thinking about, both from that sort of preventative strategy and, I mean, at a certain point when we're in these roles where we're talking about, exposure to really difficult situations on a regular basis, the line between prevention and recovery is sometimes a little bit blurry, right? We're kind of preparing for the next thing and dealing with the last thing at the same time. Yeah. What are some of the other really critical things? We've talked about engaging with a therapist, at least finding someone to talk to. We've talked about exercise. What else? What are some of the other things that you really encourage people to consider making part of their routine experience?
Sure. I love how you talked about, we're reeling from the last thing. You didn't use these words, and then we're preparing for the next thing, right? And if you think about depression, it tends to live in the past. I should have done this. I could have done that. I messed this up. And anxiety tends to live in the future. Right. I need to do this. This is coming. This deadline's here. What's tomorrow going to bring, right? The what ifs. And so at the risk of sounding like I'm wearing Birkenstocks, what we have most control over is the present moment. And so a lot of folks have incorporated mindfulness or tactical breathing into their regimen, into their workout routine. And that's incredibly effective because what it does is it regulates the nervous system, and it also helps you to, get your body into a state where you can be present when you're at home with your family. It's really easy to get caught up in the what I should have, could have done and what needs to happen and the what ifs. And that takes us away from being present. And so there's a lot of different ways to do this. I mentioned the mindful breathing or tactical breathing, and there's different modalities to get that accomplished. But for some people, mindfulness isn't sitting and working on their breath work, but it's tinkering with their motorcycle or going on a long ride, in a beautiful area. Or, working out is even a form of being present. Essentially, anything that takes your mind away from thinking about everything else and you're focusing on something right in front of you. That's a really huge muscle that we need to be exercising and building that we tend to lose in this profession because it's so fast paced. We always have to be thinking about the next thing.
That's such a great point. Really, anything that brings you into the present moment, especially if it brings you in a way where you're focusing on something positive in the present moment, right? Something that you enjoy or that brings you peace, right? And that can be different for everyone.
Yeah, it can. And, I got to tell you, by the time a lot of my folks get to me, they're so incapable. And I say that because it's true, of focusing on the positive. If you think about the jobs that we have, it's to focus on the negative. Let's see what's wrong. We're dumping the phone. We got to look for all the bad stuff. We're talking to somebody. We got to be mindful of, are they lying? Are they looking this way? What is their body language? Right. And so we're constantly focused on the things that are wrong. That's our job. And what happens is our brains habituate. And because of neuroplasticity, which is a fancy word for it, they change over time. We're building connections that now we're focusing on the negative, not just when we're working, but when we're on vacation with our family. I had an individual who came to me. He didn't leave his county for 5 years. And the reason being is he felt that if he left, what if his guys got into this? What if his guys got into that? What if he wasn't there? And then that turned into, what if I'm driving and I'm in a dead zone and my cell phone's dead and I get a heart attack and so on. It wasn't until he couldn't take his kids to dance and he couldn't go in Costco, right, that it was bad enough. So it doesn't have to get that bad. But one of the things that I asked him to do was, I want you to write down one good thing that happens every day. That was a struggle for him. That was a big struggle for him for a while. We got through it, but sometimes it's hard to recalibrate the brain in that way when you're training it so often to look at all the bad in the world.
See, Brandy, what I heard her say is it's okay for me to play guitar really loud. At home,
I don't know about really loud.
At home, maybe during our work calls to take my mind off of. That's what I heard her say.
Is that what helps you to be really mindfully present?
It de-stresses me. Yes, it does.
I was telling Pete, I recently visited my niece and nephew, and I was reading my nephew. He's got a whole series of books about Pete the cat. And what I discovered about Pete the cat is that Pete the cat really likes to rock out on the guitar.
Yeah.
So it turns out there's already a whole children's series out there about you, Pete.
Well, that's kind of cool. It's interesting because I think in law enforcement we tend to, and I will take some self-reflection here. We tend to become, our identity becomes wrapped around the badge and the gun, right? Folks in the military, Marines are Marines, and they identify with being a Marine first. And when they're no longer a cop, an FBI agent, a Marine, then it kind of forces them to think about the question, well, what am I? Who am I? I'm dad. I'm also a partner. I'm also a neighbor. I'm a musician. Whatever. But it gives an opportunity to create an identity beyond the uniform, the badge, the gun. And I think that's healthy, frankly.
It's not only healthy, it's necessary, because as you all know, when you leave an organization, that door shuts and it is slammed hard. And sometimes the folks you think are going to be your friends and talk to you afterwards aren't available. And at some point, you're not going to know everybody in the office. So you're going out to choir practice or, drinking or grabbing coffee or whatever with your friends. And then they start talking about people you have no idea who they are. Now you have, in a very real sense, become irrelevant to the organization. And that's a really, really hard thing, especially when you identify as that and you've put in so many decades into that work. But, in law enforcement, it's a train that can't stop, right? Yeah. It's not going to stop for you. The wheel has to keep turning. And so if that's all you have, and then you find yourself with the shelf full of stuff that you haven't dealt with, now you don't have, the healthy outlets because you never needed them because you always put yourself into more work and that's how you dealt with it. And you don't have hobbies. And now your friends who are a part of the organization are no longer really, there's not a whole lot of shared interest and things to talk about. I mean, let's go back to us talking about suicide, right? You get overwhelmed. You don't have a lot else to live for or to work towards, and you lose your sense of purpose, and that's a bad place to be. Yeah.
Cherylynn, you wrote a paper, a white paper, I guess we can call it, and you put it on LinkedIn, Wellness Tactics for Professionals in BTAM. And I'm going to talk about something real quick that because we're getting a little short on time. Myth number 3: I'm desensitized. It doesn't affect me. And what I want to talk about is gallows humor or dark humor. I want to get your opinion on whether you feel that's a healthy reaction or not. I will share that I've been to as a cop, I've seen some death scenes, and there is a tendency for cops to find humor in scenes that would appall family members, and the general public may be like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're saying that." And it was frankly a reaction to what we were seeing. But what's your take on gallows humor and the healthiness or lack thereof of appropriate or not appropriate use of it from time to time?
Yeah, so this is where I tend to dissent from my colleagues with the same letters that I have. I love it. I think it's great. Especially when you're on scene and, it's not a good time for you to feel your emotions.
Yeah.
You've got to be operationally effective. And if dark humor helps minimize what's in front of you so you can get the work done, I mean, that's operationally effective, right? And ultimately that's our job, to get the job done. Now, you put it on Facebook or you start saying it at events where there's civilians or the spouses are there. Please don't do that. That's a poor decision all day long, right? Because it is inappropriate, and it is not, and I'll use air quotes here, normal, but it's a coping skill that in this profession I think has a place and is of value. But similar to exercise or anything else, if that's the only thing you do or you do it too much, then your solution has created another problem. And so I don't think dark humor or gallows humor in and of itself is problematic. But like anything else, if it gets out of control, if it's used inappropriately, if that's all you have, if you're shocking people in the general public with it, things like that, now it's a problem.
And Kristin and I were talking about this the other day, just one-on-one, where there's a communal aspect to it. It's not like you're going to see something horrific, you're going to make a joke, and it's to yourself. You're kind of, it's part of a shared experience, right? Where you're seeing this horrific thing, and you all are kind of
a way to cope.
Yeah,
right?
It's communal.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a shared experience. I love it. I'm thinking of a joke. I will not say it.
I've got so many.
Maybe I'll tell you guys when we're done recording.
Yeah.
But I was meeting with my team yesterday, and I actually shared the joke. And we're all laughing, and we're all going, "Ugh, like that's gross, like that's But it is a shared experience, and that feels good, and that's a way to bond over something that's terrible that leaves you laughing and smiling, and that's not a bad thing. But again, overusing it or not being aware of, maybe you're using it in lieu of dealing with this stuff, right? Like then that's something we got to pay attention to. But there's a huge communal aspect to it, no doubt.
That was very much my thought when we were chatting about this the other day was, I actually think it's great. I think it's so much healthier than so many other things you can do. And it can't be the only thing, right? At some point, you actually have to process the feelings too.
Yeah. I remember one of our call outs we were on, and it was one of my first ones. So as a negotiator, and, grad school, they don't teach you practical things like, bring flats if you're wearing heels to work because you're on a negotiation team, dum-dum, right? Like things like that.
Things you have to find out the hard way.
And I get made fun of to this day, as and rightfully so. But there was an event where the media was there, not uncommon, and we're working, and the media is watching us work, and we're at a point where nothing is exigent or imminent in those minutes, and so we're decompressing, right? We're laughing, we're smiling. But this is a really heinous situation, right? And there's a lot of potential to go bad. And anyway, one of our guys says, "Hey Doc, you see that big thing up there?" And I go, "Yeah, what's that?" And they go, "That's a boom. Stop talking." And you see that thing over there? It's a camera. Stop laughing. And so, he did it in a much more collegial way, but I very much appreciated that. So time and place.
Time and place. Yes. Mm-hmm. Very true. Oh my goodness. Well, man, we have covered a lot of ground with you today. I'm so glad that you had first of all, just to give us this amount of time, I really appreciate. But really to share some of this kind of expertise with our audience, really think about some of these things that you might want to start putting in place now if you don't already have. sound guidance. Before we wrap up, are there other things that you want to share? I know Pete has got a closing question for you. But is there anything that we didn't get to today that you wanted to chat with us about? Yes.
Just, I suppose, two brief things. One, it's okay not to be okay, but it's not okay to stay that way, right? So you just did 800 sit-ups or 600 sit-ups, like you're
whoa, it's up to 800? Good God.
6 or 8, whatever it is too much, right? So it's expected to be sore, and that soreness comes out in the symptoms and indicators. And then, but it's not okay to stay that way. And we do have a zero fail mission, and it is not selfish to take care of yourselves. It's one of the ways that we support the communities that we work in. So that would be number one. Number two is, if you are going to seek a therapist and you are in this work, find somebody that is culturally competent, that understands or can hold, this stuff. What you don't want to do is finally make the phone call, and now you're sitting across somebody who is sensitive, and you're starting to unpack, an investigation or whatever it is. And then they say, hold on, this is too much for me. I'm going to have to refer you to somebody else. Yeah. And that's happened.
How would we get started finding somebody with the right expertise? I mean, I'm guessing for most people, we're starting with a Google search, maybe an internet search based on our health insurance provider. What are some of the things that people can look for to let them know that they're headed in the right direction?
Yeah. So one thing that's not on Google, but that's word of mouth. And so now that we're talking a little bit more about therapy as a culture, ask who people are seeing, ask who's been vetted, right? Things like that. And then on the online community, there's only so much that you get from a screen, right? So generally speaking, if you see a practitioner that's an expert in everything, ADHD, eating disorders, law enforcement, line of duty deaths, OCD, that's a problem. Be skeptical. So you want somebody that has a specialization, and do an interview. Give them a call and see if it feels comfortable. Ask them what they know about law enforcement or, the work that you do. And maybe they don't, but maybe they're willing to learn. Therapy is a lot about fit. And it's a relationship. And so there's some trial and error. And so if the first one you see isn't the one that you're going to jive with, don't say, see, I told you therapy would never work. That's likely due to the individual. And so you want to do some vetting by also talking to them. But there are also national listservs. So IACP, International Association of Chiefs of Police, the FOP, Fraternal Order of Police, and some other large organizations have done some vetting already. And so that would be another place to look. And then you see if those practitioners take your insurance.
Take advantage of that. Yeah, use that as a way to begin narrowing down. That's great advice.
Yeah.
No, true story. I fired a therapist one time because she cried more than I did. And I was like, you got to keep your shit together. You got to stay together. I'm the one supposed to be losing it. This is not a good fit. No, but true story. That is a true story. And I will share that I'm a big believer in therapy. I think it is good for the whole person. And to my former colleagues out there in law enforcement, just go and see somebody and talk to somebody professionally. There is no shame in it. My last question is least favorite exercise in the gym and most favorite exercise in the gym. And I think sit-ups might be one of them for you.
Yeah, no, I hate sit-ups because I had 2 C-sections, and it's certainly something that I should be doing more of, but
miserable.
Yeah, no, I would say leg day is my favorite. So squats are the best kind of workouts. The things that I like the least are probably the ones that I don't do, so they're not top of mind. Let's just go with sit-ups. As much as I use that as an example, it's probably something I should be doing a little bit more of. I need to be redeveloping those muscles after having my 2 kids, but leg day is always my favorite.
We always can improve on something. We all have something that we're going to focus on. So, well,
Indeed.
thank you so much. Great conversation. I learned so much, frankly. Kristin.
Absolutely. Dr. Cherylynn Lee, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for your time and your expertise and for the really important work that you do.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having this platform and talking about wellness. I think that helps, and all the other topics that you cover. And thank you for the work that you do. Very much. Thank you.
In my background, I just didn't. I've done a lot more with psychologists now at the BTAC and with you all. But back in the day, I didn't have a lot of interaction with psychologists on the job, and I really, I kind of wish I did, to be honest with you, especially after talking to Cherylynn.
Well, I love this dynamic of psychology and law enforcement together. I think it's one of you get really different types of personalities, but I think it can work so amazingly well, like it does on our team. And you get really different perspectives and I don't know, just backgrounds. When it works well, it works really well. And I think our team is a great example of that. But it's not something you would naturally think to bring together necessarily, these really different disciplines and perspectives. But I think when we're talking about BTAM and behavioral threat assessment, sort of just generally, these are kind of two of our core groups, aren't they?
Yeah, and she was more, she's a psychologist, not to take away from her credentials, but she's almost like a wellness authority. Like, I loved her focus on just overall wellness, not just mental health wellness, but like the whole mind and body synergy and emotions and everything that comes into that is she's more of a can I hire her as my life coach? Is that appropriate?
You could ask. I don't see how it would hurt.
I mean,
she's I think you get yourself to the next threat assessment conference, the next ATAP, and at least you get some individual chats with her in between sessions.
Yes. As long as she doesn't ask me if I did 600 sit-ups again.
No.
In one session?
Nobody's doing 600 sit-ups.
Over a month? Like, that's crazy. No, but I will say I'm off to the gym after this. She's inspired me to continue my fitness journey, and I think I do hope our audience takes away that mental health and physical health super important to deal with stress, and especially especially the stress that we deal with within the DOW, within the law enforcement community, the first responder community. You could be an Amazon driver. And trust me, you have stress because it's like, I was just at this house yesterday. What more do you need? And it's, I couldn't combine these purchases, so I didn't have to, but that there's stress with those jobs as well. I'm probably speaking for my Amazon driver in particular, but great conversation. And we've got some things coming up, right?
We do. Well, we've got a lot to look forward to in terms of upcoming podcasts. We've also got, I just wanted to make sure people realize that we've got a bulletin now on secondary trauma that has just come out, should have by the time that this is released.
Fingers crossed.
Should be able to find that online as well. But just tackling a lot of new and exciting topics.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got the AI podcast that's going to come out if it hasn't already by now, and we've got we've got summer. I know you're coming here to Washington, D.C., and we're going to record some podcasts in person, which I love. You should see this booth. It's cozy. I can't wait. Yeah, it's cozy. It's it's an oversized telephone booth. But
should we invite a couple of friends?
We don't have. There's no room. There's no room for friends. This is a no friend zone. No friend zone. So no. All good. Well, my friend, I look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks.
Can't wait. Thanks everyone for listening. Looking forward to bringing you more topics. As always, let us know what you think about this episode, our other episodes. Let us know what kind of topics you want to hear us bring in some new interviewees on. We're always looking for your feedback.
Positive feedback.
Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Bye.
The views and opinions presented herein are those of the interviewer and or interviewee and do not necessarily represent the views of the Department of War or its components, including Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, or DCSA. Further, any reference to the use of specific resources or consultation with non-government personnel does not constitute endorsement by the Department of War, its components, or DCSA.